Last Christmas, I was the one who scrambled through the bitter cold to find Grandma's medicine. No one else thought to check until it was almost too late. I remember the sharp sting in my fingertips as I fumbled with the pharmacy bag, the cold seeping into my bones faster than the winter night should allow. When I handed it over, everyone was already gathered, lights twinkling on the tree, the hum of distant laughter filling the room, but no one said thank you, not even a glance. Just that familiar hum of family goodwill, assumed, invisible. That moment didn't surprise me, though. It was just how it always was with me. Tilly Lambert, the quiet one who keeps everything from falling apart. I work as a financial analyst at a big investment firm, a job that's been my steady anchor for the past 7 years. The spreadsheets, the numbers, the endless calculations. Most people might think it's dull, but for me, it's control. It's the one place where my value is clear, measurable, undeniable. Yet at home, with my family, I'm invisible. I pay off debts quietly, cover surprise expenses, and manage budgets that nobody thanks me for. My mother, Margaret, leans on me emotionally and financially, often unaware of just how much I juggle beneath the surface. She doesn't know I've tucked away a secret, a private account holding $18 million from an inheritance. It's my safety net, a quiet power I never flaunt. And then there's Ewan, my cousin, loud and brash, always eager to steal the spotlight with a snide comment or a cutting joke. He thrives on attention, something I never crave but have learned to endure. At family gatherings, his voice booms the loudest, his presence the most impossible to ignore. I sense the jealousy simmering just below his smirks, the way he glances at me with a mix of resentment and something darker, but I brush it off. I want to believe family means more than competition, more than the petty battles for recognition and control. So I smile through it, hold my tongue, and hope this year, things might finally be different. Ewan's barbs sting more this time of year, slipping in under the mistletoe and between the holiday cheer. Yet I keep my dignity. I've learned that patience and quiet strength carry me further than loud confrontations ever could. Still, there's an unease curling low in my stomach, a suspicion that something beneath the surface is shifting, something I'm not yet ready to face. For now, I carry on with my usual rhythm, the pulse of duty and care steady beneath the festive lights. Growing up, the pattern was always the same. Ewan was the golden cousin, the favored one. I remember him at 10, the center of every family praise, celebrated for his sports trophies and school awards. He was the star, the one who got the cheers and the proud smiles. Meanwhile, I was the quiet helper, the one expected to step aside and let the spotlight shine elsewhere. My parents, Margaret and Dad, loved me. I knew that. But their love came wrapped in unconscious favoritism. At a family barbecue once, I still recall the sharp sting when Ewan grabbed the last piece of Grandma's famous pie. I was told to wait because he's older, a simple phrase that crushed more than just my sweet tooth. I convinced myself those moments were just family quirks or tough love, something to laugh off, something to accept. But the little dismissals piled up, invisible bricks building a wall between me and belonging. Another time, Ewan took credit for a community project I had led single-handedly, and not a single adult corrected him. The silence was deafening. The pattern was clear. He got the praise, the attention, the validation. I was left quiet, overlooked, like a shadow in the background of every gathering. I bottled those feelings away, telling myself love would fix it. That family meant unconditional support, not competition. But deep down, I knew I was fighting an uphill battle, one where the rules were rigged against me. Every holiday, every family event, was a reminder of the invisible line Ewan seemed to have crossed into the spotlight, a line I was never invited to step over. I learned to smile through it, to keep my head down and my feelings locked inside. Still, the ache lingered, a quiet question in my heart. Why couldn't I be seen? Why did my worth have to stay hidden beneath the surface? Over the years, my sacrifices spoke louder than any words ever could. I've been the silent pillar holding this family together in ways no one acknowledges. For 5 years, I paid the $500 monthly mortgage on the family cabin, making sure it didn't slip from our grasp while others focused on their own lives. I covered $12,000 in medical bills for Mom's treatments, quietly slipping payments into accounts while she worried about the next appointment. I lent my sister Lisa $8,000 just so she could keep her car running, her lifeline to work and school. Those were not easy decisions, but they were necessary. My vacations? Many were canceled. Like the time I gave up a long-awaited trip to New York after a storm cracked the roof over Lisa's room. I spent the money on repairs instead, keeping our home safe. Daniel, my husband, watches me with concern, gently asking if I'm stretched too thin. Sometimes I wonder the same thing, but I hold on to hope that one day the family will see me, not just for what I do, but for who I am beneath it all. Lisa is caught in the middle, torn between her love for me and the grumbling she hears from Ewan. He always acts like he's the rightful heir to family attention and assets, loud enough that even Lisa can't always ignore him. Mom remains fragile but proud, holding tight to traditions even as the undercurrents pull us apart. The $318 million inheritance I keep secret is my shield, a power I've never shown anyone, too precious and private for family politics. It sits quietly in a private account, a silent promise that no matter how rough things get, I have a way out. For now, I keep it locked away, a secret strength buried beneath years of sacrifice and quiet reliability. It's my lifeline, though no one else knows it exists, and so I continue to give and give, hoping that someday, someone will truly see me. Last year's Christmas Eve dinner should have been warm and joyful, but it turned cold in an instant. The room was crowded, the air thick with stories and laughter, the scent of pine and cinnamon filling every corner. Then, Ewan's voice cut through, loud and sharp as broken glass. "Tilly? She's completely broke. Can't even afford her own apartment." The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. The room froze. I felt every eye shift to me, some filled with awkward silence, others with a hint of amusement. Mom coughed violently, trying to hide her shock behind a hand. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor beneath me, but I forced a smile, brittle and tight. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes full of concern. "Ewan's stressed," I whispered to him softly, trying to rationalize the attack. I told myself it was just one of his cruel jokes, a desperate grab for attention. Despite the humiliation swirling inside, I refused to give Ewan the satisfaction of a response. Instead, I excused myself quietly, slipping away from the table's heavy silence. That small act, walking away without confrontation, was my way of drawing a line, saying silently that I wouldn't tolerate such disrespect, even if I wasn't ready to fight back yet. But doubt crept in like a shadow at dusk. Was this just a cruel joke? Or was it the start of something far worse? I didn't know. All I knew was the seed of mistrust had been planted, and it would grow in the silence I kept between us. I could feel it before I even heard the whispered conversations, the subtle shifts in glances, the way voices trailed off when I entered the room. Ewan had noticed my pulling back, and instead of easing off, he doubled down. It was as if my quiet resistance had only fueled his desire to chip away at me. Soon, the rumors began to spread like wildfire, but whispered just low enough to claim innocence. "Tilly's too sensitive," they'd say. Or, "She's playing the victim again." The cousins, aunts, even some older family members started dropping remarks meant to make me question my own feelings. "You should lighten up, Tilly," Lisa said one afternoon, caught in the middle, her voice tinged with frustration as she repeated something Ewan had said about me overreacting. I tried to brush it off, but it stung deeply. At every family gathering, I felt the cold shoulder more than the cold air. Invitations became more like obligations, with subtle snubs that cut beneath my skin, empty chairs where I expected warmth, hushed conversations that stopped when I approached, laughter that seemed to soften whenever I drew near. Ewan's tactics worked too well. His whispered gossip painted me as selfish, as the cousin who made mountains out of molehills. Even elders who'd once given kind nods or small smiles of thanks now glanced away or exchanged looks that made my chest tighten. I began to ask myself the same question that haunted me in the quiet moments. Was I really the problem? Could all this be my fault? Daniel noticed the change. One evening, after a particularly frosty family dinner, he reached for my hand, his voice low and steady. "You're not imagining it, Tilly. This isn't about you being sensitive. It's Ewan trying to isolate you. Hold on to that. I'm here." His reassurance was a balm, but it couldn't erase the ache of feeling invisible. The house seemed smaller, the walls closing in on me. I thought about all those times I'd quietly covered bills, patched up crises, held the family's finances together without saying a word. Had any of it mattered? Or had it just made me an easy target? Yet, even as doubt gnawed at me, I clung to hope. Hope that family blood meant more than jealousy and petty wars. That someday they'd see me not just as the problem, but as the person I was beneath it all. After weeks of tension, I finally decided to confront Ewan, not with anger, but with calm. I asked him to meet me at a quiet cafe near the park, somewhere neutral where we could talk face to face without an audience. I laid out my thoughts carefully, the words chosen with care. "Ewan, I've always tried to keep peace, but this isn't peace anymore. I've supported this family in ways you know, and maybe ways you don't. I'm hurt by what's been said and done. Can we just talk this through? I want respect. I want understanding." His smile was slow, almost sweet, but there was something cold behind it, a mask I'd seen before. He blinked, his voice softening into a theatrical whisper. "Tilly, you don't get it. Everyone's tired of your coldness. You act like you're perfect, but you push people away. Maybe we're the ones being honest." His eyes glistened with fake tears, and I felt my chest tighten with frustration. I tried to explain how I felt, how his words hurt, how family should be about support, not tearing down, but he twisted my words, making me sound defensive, unreasonable, even selfish. Later, desperate for support, I went to Mom, hoping she'd understand. Instead, she waved it off. "Ewan's just upset. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Tilly." The elder cousin we asked to mediate was no better, calling my feelings overblown and too sensitive for this family. I left both encounters not with relief, but hollow and alone. My hope for peace crumbled like dry leaves, replaced by a bitter realization. I wasn't just unheard, I was being dismissed, left to bear the weight of silence. 3 months passed, each day heavier than the last. Then came the community fundraiser, an event where colleagues from my firm and friends I trusted gathered. A chance to show a different side of life outside family drama. I'd hoped for a night of normalcy, maybe even connection. But Ewan had other plans. As I was chatting with a few coworkers about an upcoming project, he appeared beside me, loud and unapologetic. "Did you know Tilly's drowning in debt? Funny, isn't it? For a financial analyst?" His smirk was sharp as a knife, and laughter rippled around the circle like poison. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, my cheeks burning with shame. Daniel's face tightened beside me, his eyes darkening with anger, but I couldn't speak. The damage wasn't just humiliation, it was tangible, real. I heard a colleague whisper doubt to another, questions about my reliability and professionalism. A client who had once praised my work now seemed hesitant. His tone clipped during a phone call I overheard. It wasn't an accident. Ewan had weaponized my private struggles, dragging them into the light to break me socially and financially. My hands trembled as I excused myself, the room spinning. But what stung most wasn't the cruel reveal. It was the silent response from family. They looked away, said nothing. Their silence was a deeper betrayal than any words. I knew then this wasn't just sibling rivalry or petty jealousy. This was an escalation, a battle I couldn't afford to lose. Despite everything, I tried once more. If there was even a sliver of hope for peace, I was willing to reach across the chasm. I contacted Ewan directly, offering to help with a project he'd been struggling with. An olive branch. Plain and simple. "Ewan, I want us to be family. I want to rebuild trust. Let me help." My voice was steady, but inside I was trembling. His response was immediate and cold. "I don't need your pity or help, Tilly." The words landed like blows. I stood there, stunned. The cold cafe suddenly too small to hold the weight of that rejection. I tried to hold my ground, my voice firm despite the ache. "I need respect or nothing. I'm done pretending otherwise." His eyes gleamed with cruel amusement, and in front of my mother he mocked me openly, twisting my words into ridicule. Mom gasped, her face pale, but didn't speak up. I left that meeting with my head held high, but my heart shattered. The door was slammed shut, unmistakably and completely. For the first time, I understood. I had done everything I could. The family I'd fought so hard to protect had turned away. My hope was gone, but in its place, a cold clarity. Some things, no matter how much you want them, cannot be fixed. I felt the distance growing with every passing day, like an invisible wall rising between me and the rest of the family. Ewan's lies had taken root too well. His story, that I was difficult, cold, ungrateful, spread poison quietly but effectively. Invitations became scarce. As if my name had been erased from the group text, my presence no longer desired. Lisa pulled back, her calls less frequent, her voice more guarded when we did speak. Even Mom's once steady health faltered under the weight of the tension, her usually warm smile replaced by exhaustion and worry, her body betraying the heaviness in the air. I was left holding on to Daniel's unwavering support, his hands steady in mine when I felt like crumbling. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, questioning everything. Was I really the problem? Was I as difficult as they said? The self-doubt gnawed beneath the surface, constant and cruel. The fatigue seeped into my bones. Exhaustion not just of body, but of spirit. Each conversation replayed in my mind. Every sideways glance, every whispered word. The betrayal felt like a stone pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Yet somewhere deep inside, beneath the haze of sorrow and doubt, a faint spark flickered, a quiet readiness. I was done bleeding emotionally. I just didn't know how to stop it yet. The silence from family wasn't just absence. It was an accusation, a verdict passed without evidence. I remembered the small things I'd done, the bills covered, the medical expenses paid, the sacrifices I'd made without complaint. Did none of it matter? Was my love invisible? The sting of invisibility was sharp, a cruel reminder that no matter what I gave, it was never enough. Even Lisa seemed caught in the crossfire, torn between loyalty and the family narrative spinning around us. I longed for someone to see me, for someone to just say, "I know you're hurting, I see you." But all I got was distance and cold shoulders. Daniel's presence was my anchor. One evening, after a particularly tense family dinner, where laughter felt forced and eyes avoided mine, he squeezed my hand gently. "You're not imagining it, Tilly. It's not you. It's Ewan trying to isolate you," he said softly. His calm steadied the swirling storm inside me, but it didn't erase the pain. I lay awake that night, the weight of loneliness thick around me, but the spark that had flickered during the day glowed a little brighter. I was alone, yes, but I was no longer blind. I was starting to see the part I'd played and the parts no one wanted to admit. The family I'd held together was fracturing, and I was left to pick up the pieces, even if it felt like the pieces were slipping through my fingers. The day of the family Christmas gathering, I arrived early at the cabin, the very one I'd purchased and paid for in secret, a silent testament to my years of hard work and sacrifice. The pine scent lingered in the cold air, twinkling lights casting soft glows on the wood. I hoped for a peaceful evening, a chance to patch the widening cracks. But then Ewan's voice shattered the fragile calm. "Tilly? She's broke. Can't even afford her own apartment," he announced loudly, the room falling into a chilling silence. The words hit me like a slap. I felt every head turn, every breath catch. My heart pounded, disbelief and humiliation flooding me. Before I could even respond, the bank manager stepped forward, his tone measured but firm. "Miss Lambert, I believe you have an inheritance account worth $318 million. Would you confirm that?" The room froze. My world tilted. "My what?" I stammered, voice barely audible. Mom's face drained of color, her fragile frame convulsing with a sudden, violent cough. I rushed to her side, helpless as she struggled for breath. The smirk on Ewan's face vanished, replaced by stunned silence. Around us, jaws dropped, eyes wide with shock. The veils of deception, the hidden undercurrents of jealousy, they all lifted in that frozen moment. It was as if the family saw me clearly for the first time, except it wasn't the me I wanted them to see. It was the me they'd tried to erase, the me they'd scorned. I realized then how far their envy had twisted their perceptions, how deep their cruelty had run. The hope I clung to shattered, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. No longer was I the invisible victim. I was awake now, fully aware of the truth. They had underestimated me, and in their cruelty, they'd revealed more than they intended. The room felt heavy with tension, but inside me, something hard and resolute was taking shape. I no longer wanted their pity or their approval. I wanted to be seen, and I wanted justice. Later that night, alone in my room, the silence pressed in. I replayed the moments, the humiliation, the betrayal, the years of sacrifices laid bare and twisted into lies. The pain was raw, but beneath it, a slow, burning anger began to rise. I had been blind to the pattern for too long, unwilling to see the systemic betrayal that had threaded through family ties. It wasn't just personal. It was a cruel, calculated isolation. And yet, in the midst of my anguish, I held on to one hard fact. The inheritance was legally mine, untouchable by their schemes. That secret power, hidden for so long, now felt like a weapon in my hand. I let the anger wash over me, cleansing the hurt with its fierce heat. No more silence, no more tolerance. I whispered to the darkness, never again. It wasn't a promise to others, but a vow to myself. The grief ebbed, replaced by steely determination. This was no longer about being the quiet backbone. This was about standing tall, about refusing to be invisible or dismissed. For the first time, I embraced the power I'd kept locked away, not just as a shield, but as a sword. I was ready to fight, not with bitterness, but with calculated strength. The woman I had been was breaking, and in the shards a new self was forming, one who would no longer be silent. The next morning, Daniel and I sat together at the kitchen table, the early light casting soft shadows around us. My voice was steady, calm as I shared my plan. "It's time to stop feeding their jealousy," I said, looking into his eyes. "No more explanations, no more justifications." Daniel nodded, the familiar mix of support and caution in his gaze. We agreed that the first step was cutting off communication with Ewan and anyone enabling his toxic behavior. No more calls, no more messages returned. This wasn't about burning bridges recklessly. It was about creating boundaries strong enough to protect myself. "Our main target is clear," I continued. "Ewan's influence has poisoned everything. We need to neutralize it." Daniel's fingers intertwined with mine, steadying the resolve that was beginning to crystallize inside me. The immediate next step would be to secure the family finances, especially anything linked to the cabin and the inheritance. I needed to understand fully the legal protections around my property and the funds I'd kept secret for so long. Daniel's calm presence was a balm, reminding me I wasn't alone in this fight. I was no longer reactive. I was strategic. For the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of control, a plan taking shape. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be the silent victim, but the architect of my own destiny. I spent the next few days locked in my quiet study, surrounded by the evidence I'd painstakingly gathered. I created a detailed ledger, mapping every way the family relied on me: monthly mortgage payments for the cabin, utility bills that kept the lights on, insurance premiums I covered quietly. The total came to $1,200 a month, a number that felt both staggering and revealing. Not just the money, but the emotional support I gave to Mom, helping her manage her medications, scheduling doctor's appointments, sitting with her when the anxiety storms hit. The more I wrote down, the clearer it became. I was the linchpin holding everything together. I called my lawyer, Claire, for a thorough consultation. With her meticulous attention to detail, she confirmed the inheritance was legally protected, completely untouchable by any family claim, and that the cabin was registered solely in my name. "Tilly, you've done well to keep this separate," she said, her tone both reassuring and sharp. "You're protected, but you need to document everything meticulously. Any disputes will hinge on paper trails." I nodded, the weight of years of silent sacrifice finally transforming into a kind of armor. Every bank statement, every contract, Every text message where Ewan tried to manipulate or twist conversations was filed away in neat digital folders. I found texts where he subtly pressured Mom for money, emails hinting at his resentment of my role. The evidence was undeniable. It struck me hard. This family depended on me more than I ever admitted to myself. My patience, my sacrifices, had been a foundation beneath their shaky alliances and jealousies. Suddenly, the power dynamic felt reversed. I'd been the invisible backbone, and now that backbone was no longer willing to bend without resistance. Sitting back, I felt a pulse of strength ripple through me. The knowledge that I had the means to enforce boundaries and reclaim respect was intoxicating. It wasn't about revenge yet. It was about control, about dignity. The quiet power I'd buried beneath years of softness was now a weapon I would wield with precision. I whispered to myself, no more being the easy target. The line between victim and victor was blurring, and for the first time, I was ready to step across it. In the weeks that followed, I moved with deliberate silence. Passwords on all shared accounts were changed. Banking, utilities, even the streaming services we'd all accessed without thought. The legal paperwork was updated. Claire prepared letters restricting family access to accounts and property, ready to dispatch at the first sign of intrusion. Every step was calculated but invisible, hidden beneath the daily routines of my life. At family gatherings, I wore a calm, neutral mask. My smile was polite, my tone light, but distant. No one suspected the layers of steel beneath. Daniel noticed the change, his eyes quietly admiring the quiet strength I radiated. "You're different, in a good way," he said softly one evening after a dinner where I'd deflected Ewan's usual barbs with a serene silence. "Stronger." I squeezed his hand, grateful for the word and the warmth it carried. I kept the plan tightly guarded. Aside from Daniel, no one knew the full scope of my preparations. I understood the value of normalcy, as camouflage and as a psychological shield. The calm before the storm felt almost eerie, a quiet tension that hummed beneath the surface of everyday life. Family members went about their routines, unaware of the time bomb ticking quietly beneath their feet. I was patient, steady, and fully in control, my own sense of power growing in the silence. Then, during one late night of sorting through old emails and financial records, trying to ensure I'd uncovered every thread, I found something that made my heart slam against my ribs. Lisa, my sister, my blood. She wasn't just distant or conflicted. She was actively colluding with Ewan. Their covert messages revealed plans to siphon money from Mom's accounts, money meant for medical care and household expenses, diverted for their own gain. The betrayal was a sharp stab, deeper than any I'd imagined. I read their secret correspondence like a slow poison seeping through my veins. They plotted to discredit me, to seize control of the family property, and dismantle the fragile trust I'd tried desperately to uphold. Lisa's tone was cold and calculating, her words laced with contempt for my self-righteous attitude. I felt a surge of nausea and disbelief. How could she? How could my own sister stand side by side with Ewan in this cruel scheme? The emotional weight crushed me, heavier than Ewan's betrayal alone. The realization ignited a new urgency inside me. This was no longer a battle of jealousy or rivalry. This was a calculated campaign of sabotage, a deliberate dismantling of the family I'd tried to protect. The stakes had shifted. It was no longer just about my dignity or respect. It was about survival and justice. I clutched the phone, my hands shaking. "This changes everything," I murmured to Daniel, knowing he'd understand the depth of this double cross. The day I began to pull back financial support, I felt a quiet but potent sense of control. I stopped the mortgage payments on the cabin, let the medical bills for Mom's care go unpaid. It was a subtle withdrawal, small ripples that would slowly become waves. The family began to feel the strain. The lights flickered in the cabin, calls from utility companies became more frequent, and the unpaid invoices quietly piled up. Yet no one connected these signs to me. I blocked calls and messages from Ewan and Lisa, cultivating a cold distance that they couldn't breach. The silence between us grew like a wall, thick and unyielding. Small, formal legal notices were sent, warning against unauthorized access to accounts and property. It was a quiet war, fought through paperwork and withheld payments. No outbursts, no dramatic confrontations, just measured moves that unsettled the family without revealing my hand. Daniel stood firmly by my side throughout it all, his steady presence a balm to my resolve. "You're doing what you have to do," he said softly one evening, meeting my eyes with unwavering support. The first domino had fallen. The balance of power was shifting, and I was no longer the silent victim but a force of steady, unyielding will. The air in the room was thick with tension as Greg Yates called us all together in the cabin's living room, a room that had always been a battleground of whispered accusations and silent resentments. The walls, adorned with fading family photos, seemed to close in on us. I stood by the fireplace, calm as I crossed my arms, feeling the weight of every eye on me. Mom sat quietly, her frail hands gripping her lap, Daniel close beside her, radiating silent support. Ewan was there too, his usual swagger replaced by a restless energy, eyes darting nervously. Lisa sat near the edge, avoiding my gaze like it was fire. Clearing my throat, I began. "There's been a lot of confusion and hurt lately," I said, voice steady, "and I want to address it directly, here and now." I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of documents, the crisp rustle echoing in the silent room. "First," I said, holding up a legal deed, "this cabin is registered solely in my name. I purchased it outright, with my own funds." I watched as a flicker of disbelief crossed several faces, including Ewan's, whose jaw visibly tightened. "Second," I continued, "I possess the legal documents proving my inheritance account, over $3 million, that no one here has legal claim to." I handed copies around, the paper heavy with undeniable proof. Then I presented the messages. Emails and texts that exposed the secret collusion between Ewan and Lisa, their plans to exploit Mom's accounts for personal gain. The room went deathly quiet. I could see the color drain from Ewan's face. His usual bravado faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic. Lisa kept her head bowed, cheeks flushed. My voice didn't waver as I laid out the evidence, each word measured but firm. "From this moment on," I declared, "there will be no access to any family property, finances, or influence without my explicit consent." The room held its breath. I was no longer invisible. The invisible chains of expectation and entitlement snapped, replaced by a new dynamic, one where I held the reins. The shocked murmurs and sidelong glances told me everything I needed to know. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Ewan's mouth opened, then closed as if searching for words. Instead, he sat back, defeated for now. Lisa's eyes never met mine. I sensed the family's silent calculation, their understanding that this was a turning point. I wasn't here to plead or explain anymore. I was here to set terms. The air felt electric, charged with unspoken truths, finally brought into the light. I caught Mom's eye briefly. Her expression was fragile but tinged with relief. Daniel gave me a subtle nod. In that moment, I realized the strength in standing tall, in speaking clearly, was a kind of liberation. The tides had turned, and I was finally steering the course. The days following the confrontation felt surreal. Ewan and Lisa's world began to unravel like a thread pulled loose from a too tightly woven tapestry. Suddenly, bills that had always been quietly covered were unpaid. Phone calls from creditors interrupted their usual bravado. The once confident Ewan found himself dodging messages from landlords and utility companies. Lisa's social invitations dried up. Whispers circled at family events, subtle but sharp. I watched from a distance as their facade cracked, their carefully built image crumbling under the weight of exposure and consequence. My phone buzzed relentlessly with desperate calls and apologies, texts pleading for second chances, but I held firm. I refused to engage, crafting my replies with icy politeness, or more often, no reply at all. The family's whisper network, once dominated by Ewan's influence, shifted. People questioned his integrity, his motives laid bare for all to see. Even Mom, though still weak, began to pull away from Ewan's faction, her loyalty quietly realigning. I didn't gloat or celebrate quietly. I simply upheld my boundaries with unwavering resolve. This was not about vengeance, but justice. And justice had its own rhythm, slow and deliberate. I could feel the strain in the room whenever we met, the undercurrents of fractured alliances and shifting loyalties. Yet I maintained my silence, refusing to be baited. My heart ached for the family I wished we could still be, but I knew some damage was irreversible. The consequences were real and immediate: financial hardship, social isolation, fractured trust. Ewan and Lisa were left to face the fallout alone, while I quietly reclaimed my space and dignity. The cold, measured justice I enacted wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was effective. And as I lay awake some nights, I felt a cautious sense of peace growing. Justice was finally unfolding, not with chaos, but with steady, unyielding resolve. Ewan's desperation was palpable. When the initial shock wore off, he switched tactics, becoming aggressive and relentless. He began to portray himself as the victim, spinning stories that twisted the truth and painted me as a cold opportunist. Threats of lawsuits arrived, all carefully vetted and dismissed by Claire, my lawyer, whose calm authority was a constant shield. At family events, Ewan tried to rally support, appealing to relatives with slick words and half-truths, hoping to fracture the growing consensus. But his attempts only highlighted his isolation. The more he raged, the more distant he became. Daniel stood by me unwaveringly, a steady presence that bolstered my resolve. When Ewan unleashed emotional blackmail, claiming betrayal and family ruin, I met it with silence, the strongest weapon I wielded. Attempts to guilt-trip me, to bend my will, fell flat against the foundation I'd built. Meanwhile, some family members began to approach me privately, tentative apologies, admissions of having been misled. I listened, acknowledged, but made clear boundaries. Forgiveness was not a free pass to forget. It was a cautious, slow process, guarded by the lines I drew. Ewan's alliances shrank rapidly. The people who once bent to his will now distanced themselves. His influence faded, his voice reduced to echoes in empty rooms. Lisa, too, retreated, her complicity now a stain that few wanted to touch. I saw their isolation as a silent testament to the truth I upheld, the truth that no amount of scheming could erase. My silence, once mistaken for weakness, was my strength. It refused to be broken, refused to be corrupted by their manipulations. I had become a fortress, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. The battles they fought against me were empty. My resolve was deeper than any attack. The family's fractured ties served as both a warning and a release, clear lines drawn in the sand, signaling that some wounds, once opened, changed everything. 6 months later, the cabin was quieter, not just physically, but in the shifting energy that filled it. Family gatherings had shrunk, fewer faces around the table, but those who remained carried a newfound respect for the boundaries I held. Daniel and I shared a bond forged in quiet battles and unwavering trust, our connection no longer tentative but a solid foundation. I maintained contact with Mom, limited and structured, careful to nurture what was healthy and guard against old patterns. The air felt lighter, the heavy tension replaced by a fragile peace. Ewan and Lisa's reputations within the family and social circles had diminished permanently. They faced consequences that no amount of denial could erase: a loss of trust, fractured relationships, a quiet exile. I didn't revel in their downfall. Instead, I carried with me the quiet pride of having reclaimed my life. I reflected on the journey, the pain woven through it, but also the strength born from it. The silence I chose was not emptiness. It was power, a deliberate boundary drawn against toxicity and betrayal. Christmas, once a minefield of resentment and pain, now felt like a sanctuary of peace. For the first time in years, I was free, not just from their schemes, but from the weight of needing approval or validation. The freedom to live on my own terms, to protect my dignity without apology, was worth more than any family approval I had ever sought. I learned that strength wasn't loud or flashy. It was steady, quiet, and unyielding. And in that strength, I found not just survival, but a kind of peace I hadn't known was possible. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I faced it with open eyes and a steady heart. I was no longer just the family's backbone. I was my own person, whole and unbroken.